to do some videos because I'm learning Ruby on Rails, and I wanted to kind of document the journey from learning Ruby to making websites and doing designs and all this stuff with Ruby on Rails. I'm taking more of a bottom-up approach to this because I want to learn Ruby and the object-oriented design and all that stuff before I get over to Ruby on Rails. If you just wanted to learn Ruby on Rails, you could just go to the guides on the website and do them. They're pretty good. I read online, I think like 80% of the questions asked on Stack Overflow are covered or referenced from the Ruby on Rails guides. But, well, I just want to do this journey, document it, and hopefully someone can learn something from this, and maybe it'll be helpful. So, we'll see. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm learning the Ruby on Rails Well-Grounded Ruby 3rd edition. The Well-Grounded Rubyist 3rd edition. It's a pretty good book. It's a little long. It's 1,200 pages. And I'm going to go through most of chapter 1. Not a completely exhaustive, but just some of the stuff I learned and some of the stuff I wanted to try to teach somebody to try to learn better. So we'll start off with basic Ruby language literacy. So installing Ruby and using a text editor. If you go on the Stack Overflow, Stack Overflow did a survey, and I believe it was like 30% of all web developers use VS Code. Then it was Vim and some other ones. So a lot of people are using VS Code. I think mostly because it's pretty lightweight, and I can see why. It's pretty nice for what you're using it for. You can install themes, and you can also install plugins, which are down here. So there's some useful extensions that you can install. For example, Robocop is a linter, and for anyone who doesn't know what a linter is, it basically checks the syntax of your code, make sure it's following certain design principles, and check for anything that could be an issue. This one's pretty nice. It gives you some snippets. And Ubuntu VS Code theme, that's the theme I'm using in case anyone liked this theme. And yeah, those are some of them. You can go look up what you want and use that. I like using Atom Keymap because Atom Keymap gives me the same shortcuts I used in Atom, and that's really helpful. So I don't have to relearn a bunch of different ones. Down here we have the terminal, and you see it's just like I'm using ZSH because I'm on Mac. You could be using something else if you're on Windows. It could be PowerShell or whatever you want. Like you can see, you can select the default shell, and these are the shells that are on my computer. So if I want to do PowerShell, then I click that, it'd give me a PowerShell shell. But that's because I have PowerShell installed on my Mac. You might not have that if you have a Mac and you didn't install it. Okay, so we're using ZSH and we're on Ruby. You type in ruby-v, it will give you the current Ruby version you're using. I'm using Ruby 2.7.1. Ruby is, just to get some terminology out of the way, Ruby with a capital, that's the language, that's the programming language. This here, that's the interpreter, and IRB is the interactive Ruby. So that's what you're going to use if you want to actually interact with the Ruby. For example, if I type in IRB, then I can start doing stuff like X is assigned to 4, then type X and that's there. Type exit to leave. And you can also do some cool things with Ruby. I think if you do ruby.h, then you can see the options you have for the different flags. This -c will check the syntax. -e, I believe, will execute it. I could be wrong, I don't remember. But yeah, so if you ever wanted to find something with the tool you're using, just look up this. You see -v, which is what I just used to print the Ruby version. So those are the basics of that. I could write code in the Ruby file, then run that, or I could use the interpreter. I think it's really important to start understanding the interpreter because that's basically your playground. Like you can have that as a scratch note and just play around with stuff and get stuff, figure stuff out, get stuff working. So if I'm assuming you have some knowledge of the command line, but if you don't, then you could just type in the commands I'm using. ls, and I'll try to explain the commands I'm using as I'm going. ls is going to print out all the files in the current directory. Right now I only have example.rb. If I want to run example.rb, have some valid Ruby in there, I could say x is assigned to 4, or 2, sorry. You see this at the bottom? I should have mentioned this, but I have Robocop installed. So that's the linter we were talking about, and it's going to highlight any issues I might have with my code, and it's gonna, when it saves it, this will run and it will try to add anything new. I know we just began, but I just wanted to explain what frozen string literal is because, well, why not? Basically, the thing is with strings is that if I have, say, x is assigned to a word, and I save that. Actually, you know what? It might be better to do this in the interpreter. So if I come here, I type in the interactive Ruby, and I get the interactive Ruby. So let's say x is assigned to a word. And by the way, just to clear some things up about strings, usually you want to use this is called a literal string when you use a single quote. And usually you want to do this because it's not going to run anything. It's going to be literally just that. If you use double quotations, that's what you use when you do string interpolation. String interpolation is basically if you have a variable and you want to go and plug it in, or an expression essentially. You have an expression and you want to go put it in that word. So you can use either one, but it's preferable to use a single quote. If you, for example, let's say you have like another single quote there or something that's going to break the string, you can use the backslash. I think it's a backslash. And the backslash will escape whatever special character you're using. I think if you double one, then you can do double backslash, just like that. So keep in mind about that. Another use for using the single quotes is, for example, let's say I have like, this is some word. You can see like you can have the double quotes inside of it without it messing up the other quotes. But usually, unless you have a reason to, you should probably use the single quotes. So back to my example, we said x is assigned a word, and that's a string literal. So if I type x, it's going to tell us what it's equal to, and it's going to say it's equal to that word. Strings can be changed. So if I say x, and for anyone who doesn't know, a string is basically a character array, so you can treat it like an array. And in Ruby, when you have an array, you have the square brackets. So let's say I want the first character, I put the 0. Then I'll assign it to something else. Let's just say I'm going to just say some gibberish. I'll say C. I guess I'll say chord, but whatever. Yeah, so then I go and I click X, and now you can see it says chord. If I go and I change that back to W, and I click enter, and I say x.freeze, now what you'll see what will happen is I go and I do that, and it won't let me. So that is what a frozen string is. With a frozen string, you basically make it so they can't change the string itself. Now, I'm pretty sure you can reassign the string, you just can't change the string. So as you can see, you can just completely reassign it. And the reason you can reassign it like that is because what a variable is, variable is basically a reference. Sometimes it can take in like the literal value, like x can literally be 2 if you assign it to 2. But if you're pointing to something, and that's the thing with Ruby is all objects. So everything in Ruby can be considered an object. Even a string can be considered an object. As a matter of fact, if I do like something, then I do dot object. I have no idea if this is going to work. I'm just guessing. Yeah, then you see the string has an object ID. So even the string is an object. So back to what I was saying, a variable either takes on the value, let's say if I assign it to 2, or it can be a reference to something. So a variable, in this case, a variable x is a pointer, so it points towards a string object. So that's why we can't change the string, but we can reassign the variable even though we can't change the string. One important thing to note is when you freeze a string, that you can't unfreeze a string, so it's permanent. You can't undo a freeze. I kind of went on a tandem there explaining some things. I'm gonna have a hard time following a straightforward path, so sorry about that, but we'll get better. We'll get there. Okay, so now we want to cover some basic Ruby syntax, and I think I'm going to stay mostly in the interactive Ruby. If that bothers you, then I guess leave a comment and I'll take note. Yeah, So what we're going to do, let's do some basics arithmetic. So with variables, you can assign a variable saying like f or whatever. Like it's basically, it follows the normal shit, I forgot what I was gonna say. The normal variable naming. So you can name it whatever you want, but there are special characters that you're not allowed. So just look that up if you're wondering. But one of the cool things you can do, I don't know if you can do this, you usually do this with a method. So if I show you a method, for example, like if I say define, then I say is a number, or I'll just say I don't know, define is a number. Then I do that. Then you can see, even though we're in the interactive Ruby, we haven't finished our statement, so it can go back to that. Actually, I kind of messed that up. You can actually put a question mark in. That's a good, so following styling guides, in Ruby, you want to use snake case. So if you've ever used JavaScript or something, you've probably seen camel case. Just to give you an understanding of what the different ones are. I could be wrong with this, but I'm pretty sure if you have like some variable, like whatever, assigned to 5 or 3, this is Pascal case. I could be wrong. Sorry, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure this is Pascal case. This here, some variable, is camel case, and with camel case you always have the first letter lowercase, then you have every letter of the word after uppercase. There's other ones, but I'm just naming these ones because they're like the most relevant ones. Then we have snake case. So we have snake underscore case, and with snake case you basically have the name underscore the word underscore next word, and that's how you split them up. Usually when you're naming files in Ruby or Ruby on Rails, you use snake case to name the files. Same with functions, you'd use snake case. The only time, well, not the only time, but one of the examples where you'd use Pascal case is if you're naming a class, because if you're naming class, then you'd use uppercase. So back to this example, if I say define as a number, I honestly don't remember what the function call is for saying if it's a number or not, but let's just return true. Then I say end. Then now I have a function as a number, so I say is underscore number, trace back, undefined local variable or method is a number. Okay. Then I'll do it in here then. So type exit to leave the interpreter. Depending on what you're using, you can type clear or CLS to clear your screen. And we'll just come over here. So if I say define some function question mark, then I type in true and I type in end. Okay, so basically I know I didn't like include any parameters or anything, like it doesn't do anything, it just returns true. But the reason I put that, and let's just make sure that works. Yeah, okay, good. Okay, so the reason I put this here is to demonstrate two things. If you have a function that's meant to tell if something's true or not, usually it's a good idea to put a question mark under it or beside it, and you can do that with functions in Ruby. Not sure if you can do it with other languages, but in Ruby you can do that. So if I say some function and I want to know if this is true or not, then I put a question mark because I'm asking a question, and it's going to return either true or false based on what it is. Now, some of you might be wondering, why did this return true? Because I didn't put the return statement. Well, it turns out either one works. And the return, an explicit return is optional, so you don't have to put one. Whatever is returned here, if you don't put a return statement, then it's whatever this function evaluates to. So in this case, the last line was true, so it evaluates to true. Now you might be looking at this one, you're like, oh, what? There's no parentheses. Why is he calling a function with no parentheses? Also, there's no parentheses here either. Well, they're optional too. I'm pretty sure this should work. I should be able to run that. Yeah, I can do that. So even though there's no parentheses, it can still work. Even if you wanted to pass it a parameter, like say x is assigned to 4, and I put x into there, then I say puts. I know I didn't introduce puts yet, but I'll get to it. Okay, what do we got? X, undefined local variable, x. Some bar. Did I do something wrong? Syntax error, line 8. 1 second. I'm just gonna look at some of my other code. Yeah, it should have worked. That's why it's a little confused about that. That's okay. This is our first video anyway, so it doesn't matter. Okay. I'll do this so I can reference some things. So if I say x is assigned to 5, then I put x dot to underscore string. Oh, sorry, I'm still in the same one. In case anyone's wondering, you can copy path by doing that. Okay. Do ls, and you can see all my files there. So yeah, so we do /youtube.rb. Okay, now we can do that. Why? Oh my god. I'm in PowerShell. What the fuck? Sorry. I was like, what's going on? I set the thing to default PowerShell. So that's what was going on. That was really confusing. And it's still on PowerShell. I need to change it back. So we're using ZSH. I'll just open another one, whatever. That is really, really annoying. I thought I was going crazy for a second. Okay, we do Ruby youtube.rb. Okay, now we got 5, which is what I was expecting. Okay, sorry for that little setback, but we're back on it. So, I forgot, I lost my train of thought, but I'll just keep going from here. So puts stands for puts string, and that's going to print out our x value. And there's a couple different ones. I believe put string, like if I do this and I save it. Oh, there's another thing, is that the Robocop has to finish saving before the file gets updated, so there you go. Put string is going to add a new line to it, whereas print, say something. Oh, we gotta wait for Robocop. Okay. You see how there's a new line here? It's prints 5, then it puts the next line. Print will put literally what you tell it. So put string is going to put the value, then it's going to add a new line to it, which is what happens. Prints the value, add a new line. Prints value, adds a new line. Then over here we have print something, which will print exactly what we tell it to. Pretty sure if we do \n, / or /, I don't remember. I thought it was one. Okay, just ignore that then, whatever. Oh wait, I actually can't tell that because I'm not sure if Robocop was finished. We gotta wait for Robocop. My computer's slow. Dum 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 dum. Come on. Come on. Yeah, whatever. Alright. So back to what we were talking about. We have print and we have puts. If we want to get input from a user, we can use gets, and that stands for get string. So if I say, I don't know, user input is assigned to gets, then I go and I puts user input. Okay, now I run that. I gotta wait for Robocop to finish the game. Oh, there we go. They just didn't put a new line, that's why. I put something, or test. I type enter. There you go. Now it prints out test. So what will happen if we say chomp and we put a print? Let's see. Let's see what will happen. Test. And we'll comment these out. By the way, comment's a hashtag, in case you're wondering. My computer's so slow. Let's just wait. There we go. Okay. Test. You see it doesn't put the new line after. And that's what chomp does. Is chomp's going to remove any new lines or anything like that and just give you the text. Whereas gets will give you everything it gets. Yeah. Okay. Now let's cover if statements. So you have a few. So if you have the first one, if else. I can show you this one. If some expression, so we'll say like if true, or if x equals 5, then we put x is 5. Then we can say x is not 5. Now let's run that. Once we assign x a value. And it says x is not 5. So if we go to expression, prints out x is 5, or prints out x is not 5. Another thing we could try is what if we change this to an empty string and we said if x. And we'll say if x is true, if x is not true. Save that, then we run it. Once it loads, we can run it. Just keep thinking, just keep thinking. Once it's done loading, there we go, x is true. Just took it like 10 years, but whatever. As you see, this is true because everything in Ruby except for false and null will evaluate to true. So unlike JavaScript, you don't have to worry about all these different conditions. Just if it's null or if it's false, it will evaluate to false. Everything else will evaluate to true. Now let's talk about one other thing. Is sometimes when you're coding, you have to do kind of like the opposite. So instead of doing like if this condition passes then do this, well, what we want is we want to do this if the condition doesn't pass. So we have the unless statement. So unless this condition happens or does not happen, then do this block. So let's say we use x. Then we say x is assigned to the empty string, which we know evaluates to true. Then we puts unless block was run. Now let's try it. Once it's done loading, so unless this is not true, in this case x is going to be evaluated to true. So if we say false, it's got a loading in. Sorry. Saving. Now unless block was run. Oh my god. Okay, basically what happened was Robocop found a better way of programming this. So there's a shortcut you could use, which basically puts the block there. If it's a one-liner, you can put the block there. Then you can put unless. This also works with if. So you can say unless run this statement unless this condition, or you can say run this statement if this condition. So that's also a little shortcut you can do. Okay, so now we're going to cover some of the identifiers, and we're going to need a class to be able to do that. So let's start playing around with that. So here, class name, as you can see, Pascal case, we have an uppercase on the first letter and they're combined. Usually we use snake case, but in classes you use uppercase, Pascal case. Another thing to note is in programming and software engineering, you want to be modeling whatever you're doing. If you're writing code for a bike, for example, like you want to be modeling the bike. So the classes should map over to what you're modeling. So in general, usually the classes are going to be named by a noun. And you want to make sure that you have low coupling and high cohesion, so everything inside a class should be similar to each other. So in this case, we'll just call it bike, and this will be our class. Okay, so now we have bike. If we wanted a constructor, we just did that. I actually forget what the constructor is. Constants, class stuff. Oh, it's initialize. Yeah. I've been using PowerShell. Okay. So yeah, this is how you make a constructor. You can pass in a value or not. We'll pass in menu. In this case, the way you instantiate a class is you put your variable, like we can say bike, is assigned to bike.new. And that will give us a new instance of this bike. However, we need a venue. In this case, we'll change that to be name. So we want a bike name. Type name, we type a name, and then what happens is we give it a name and we call it my bike. Okay, we save it and we're gonna wait because Ruby code formatter has to run on my computer. And just as it loads, I just want to say a few things. This basically here is a constructor, and what this is, it's an instance variable. And instance variables are really useful because you can define them, for example, inside of initialize here. This is like the local scope, but now it's going to be a variable. It's going to be available throughout your whole class. And when you use Rails, for example, in Rails it has the model view controller architecture, and it passes the values from your controller over to the views. And the way it does this is it uses the instance variables from your classes and passes them over to your views, so then you can use those instance variables. So that's why it's really handy to have those. And probably talk about another video. We'll probably talk about another video on like how you can add getters and setters and how you can do it cleanly, so you don't have to write a ton of code to provide getters and setters. And that's just saying that bike class was never used. So what happens if we say bike.name? It's got to run again. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. There we go. It gives us an error. Nope. Method error. Maybe because I didn't put a attribute reader name. Let's let it load again. My bike. Okay, so what attribute reader does, it basically gives it a getter for this name here to be able to read it, and then you can print it. If you're wondering what this is here, it's a symbol. We'll talk about symbols later, but that's what that is. Let's talk about some other things. Let's talk about method calls and messages. So in Ruby, everything is considered an object, and even a class is considered an object. That's why when you start discussing about these things, you start off with talking about objects, then you can start talking about the classes. And one of the things about objects is that you, in Ruby, like, it makes more sense to say that you're sending a message to a receiver than saying that you're calling a method. And the reason you kind of want to look at it that way is you're sending a message is because you can actually intercept missing messages, and frameworks use that a lot to be able to catch any messages and see if it's not, see if it's if there's something they can do with it or error handle it or something like that. There's even a gem. Gems are dependencies, and what the gem does, it checks if you give it like a function name that's not correct, it will look at it'll do a method lookup to look at the different messages that object has, and it will display any ones that are similar to what you send. So it's a lot of stuff you can do with that. And also, if you're doing object-oriented design, which is basically like the structure and how your objects interact with each other, it's good to look at it from designing from the messages, because the messages are going to tell you where the dependencies between your objects are, not the classes themselves, even though the classes are what's so like seeable. Like, you have classes, and those classes have messages, but you don't see the lines between the different objects, and the messages is what essentially is going to make up your dependencies on each other. Okay, so what's next? We'll start with defining a message or a method. So we'll say define example, or define print name. Then we don't have to put parentheses, but we could. I won't, just for this example. And you can see we use snake case here. So we'll just do put string, and we'll do @name, command save. Then we'll comment that out with the hashtag, and we'll run it again. I probably want to call it once this gets saved, then there you go, my bike. So here we can look at this as we're sending the message print name to bike, then bike will handle that message. In this case, it printed out this instance variable. There's something else I was going to say, I forget though. So now that we covered that, we can probably talk about the attribute reader and the writer. There's three of them. There's attribute reader, there's attribute writer. Here you put your attribute name, so you can say name. So now what we can do, now that we have the name, is that we can actually assign it like we would, like this. Like .name is assigned to new name, exclamation mark. Then we'll do another print name. And once that's saved, we'll run that again. New name. As you can see, the attribute writer lets us assign that value, and the attribute reader lets us read in that value. But what if we want to do both? Well, you're in luck, because if you type in attribute, I forget, accessor? Yeah, attribute accessor, then you put in your thing. You put in name, then it gives you both. And you save that, we'll wait for Robocop to run and sync. Then we can come in here, we type in Ruby, and you can see new name. And we just did that in one line. So that's the thing with Ruby, is Ruby's such a massive language that you can do a lot with a few lines, depending on like how much you understand of the actual language. So let's look at some other things in the interactive Ruby. So if we type in interactive Ruby -h, then you can see the different commands or different switches it offers. No echo basically doesn't show when you type something. Like if you type x is assigned to 5 and you hit enter, it's not going to print out 5 as it usually would. Some other ones. verbose shows more detail. You show the version. I think there's one called -r. -r is how you load a module. So if you want to load something into your interactive Ruby so you can use it, you'd use -r. And there's some things that Ruby comes with out of the box that might be pretty helpful, and they're called gems. What a gem is, it's basically a dependency that you can load and install, and some of them that Ruby comes with is did you mean, Minitest, NetTelnet, PowerCert, Rake, Doc, Test Unit, and XML Pierce, XML RPC. That's just to name a few. Rake is short, or it's a concatenated for Ruby make. It's made in Ruby, but it basically lets you run administrative utilities. And we can do an example. If we do here, we'll do a new file, and we'll do a rake example, and you just name it RB because it's also like an RB file. So if we're gonna go look at the rake, which is basically a utility, administrating utility, what you can do is you can use a namespace. So let's say we say namespace admin. Then we say do, which is basically a procedure. We give it a description, and we say this is our admin task. Then once we do that, we can say task, give it a name, print, then we say do. Then we can just say print, this is a task. And we can put end. What's wrong? Title review under all columns. There we go. Okay. So now we have our little task, and this is, you can do much more. Basically, like, you put the task, you put your task name of whatever you want to do, then inside that block you do what that task is supposed to do. So I believe we can start playing with rake now. So if you type in rake tasks, you can see rake admin clean temp, interactively delete all in CMP. That was another rake task I did. Rake admin cleanup. We're saving. Okay. Yeah, I'll show you this example. So there's the namespace admin clean temp. This one was from the Well-Grounded Rubyist 3rd edition. So I'm going to give that a try and try running that. Rake admin. Rake admin, which is the namespace, then clean underscore temp. Permission denied. And it just ran. So that's how you do it. You basically create your own task, and once you create your own task, you can do rake dash tasks 2 dash, and that will tell you the rake tasks that you have in there. You can also do rake dash age, and that will give you some more options. Show all the tasks, even uncommented ones. We'll try that. Tasks dash A. Oh. Rake dash A. Don't know how to build task default. Okay. But yeah, so you can basically look at that for more examples. And I think that's all for today. Thank you for watching. I know this isn't perfect, but hopefully I'll get better at this through each week. Every week I'll do a video just showing what I learned or what I don't know, as you can see in sometimes when something breaks. And we'll just go through this journey together. Thank you.